Hey everyone, welcome to this week's video. Just a quick disclaimer, I'm not feeling too great this week, and that's partially why I didn't post a video last week. I'm also going to do this video in segments, so there might be some jumps here and there instead of my usual one take, and I've turned my camera off this week because I don't look great as well as feeling great. But I want to give you something this week at least, so that's that out of the way. So, what we're going to be doing is, it's going to be a continuation from the previous video, which we discussed about the energy usage and jump. So if you didn't watch that, I do recommend you watch that, but essentially what we did was, if you press jump, it uses your energy bar, and then it slowly regenerates. Obviously then if you continue to jump, it won't let you until you've got enough energy, but it'll regenerate while you don't have enough energy. So we're putting some checks in there, and then we've built on top of that this week with a sprint. So if I hold shift, you can see that I'm sprinting, and then when I run out of energy it stops me from sprinting, which then the energy starts to regenerate. You can sprint, you can stop, and then it'll start to regenerate as soon as you do. So let's just have a quick look at the event graph. There's quite a lot all condensed into a small space. So we're pressing sprint, we're checking if we've got the energy to do it. We're also checking if we are moving, because if we're not moving, we don't want to start using our sprint energy if we're not actually traveling. When we do start to travel, then we're going to cancel our regeneration, because we don't want to regenerate as we're sprinting. We're then going to start sprinting with this speed modifier. So this is basically just we're just timesing our current speed by a value, and then we're dividing it to reduce it back down. This is where we're setting if we are now currently sprinting. We check again if we're actually moving, just as another check, just in case you're jumping or something like that. And then we're starting a timer which is going to deplete your energy for every 0.1 of a second that you're running. That depletes your energy, and then as your energy is depleting, we're just checking again then if we stop moving, and if we do, we want to stop sprinting, and also we are checking to see if you've got enough energy to continue sprinting, because if you don't, then we want to stop you from sprinting. And then on the release, if you stop sprinting yourself, if you've not run out of energy and you decide to stop, what we're doing is we're then going to check to see if we're sprinting, just as a safety check. We're then going to tell the system to stop sprinting. We're going to check to see if we've already got a regeneration timer started. If we haven't, then we're going to start regenerating health and then clear our sprint energy timer. Now, I might have just said a few things there which you don't understand, but don't worry, we're going to talk through it, and it should all make sense by the end. So let's move on to that. I'm just going to clear all this, and then I'll see you in a few minutes. Okay, so just before we start, I actually decided not to delete it. I've just disconnected the input actions. That's because if anything doesn't go as planned, then at least I've got it there. And with me not feeling too great, I've got a feeling something's not going to go as planned. But first and foremost, what you want to do is you're going to want to set up your input controllers, so then you've actually got a key mapping for sprinting. So the best way to do this is go to Edit at the top, and you want to go to Project Settings. This will open this tab, and then on the left hand side under the Engine menu, you've got Input. Under Input at the top, you've got Bindings. Now you've got Access Mappings and you've got Action Mappings. Now a sprint is an action, so we're going to set up an action mapping. To do this, you just want to press this little plus button, and then this will bring up a new action, and you just want to name this to Sprint. Yeah, I'll put Sprint New, just for the sake of it. Yep, and for this bit, you want to set it to a key value, and under None, you want to select Keyboard, and then I scroll down and I find left shift. So that's going to be my sprint key, as you can see here, left shift. Okay, so with that binding set up, we're then going to go back to our event graph. If you right click now on your event graph and you type in sprint, you should see an action event called sprint, and I've got sprint and sprint new. So under sprint new, this is what we've got. So when we press sprint, we're going to want to increase the sort of the movement speed of the character. Now, one easy way to do this is every character's got a character movement component in the hierarchy, or your components on the left hand side. You might need to scroll right down to the bottom, or if your screen's a bit bigger you might already have it. And essentially inside this this component there is a speed, a walking speed. So you can see here under character movement walking we have a maximum walk speed, and that's set to 600. Now if we adjust that, that is going to increase the speed of our character. So we can essentially map that to this key press. So when we press the button, we want to change this max walk speed to something else, and then when we release, we want to change it back. And that'll give us the impression of a run or a sprint. So to access this, what you want to do is you want to grab your character movement component and just drag it into the scene, into your event graph. And then if you want to drag off that, what you can do is you can type in max walk, and you'll get some options. So you can set max walk speed and you can get max walk speed. You can also change it for when it's crouched and stuff like that, but that's a different video. So what we want to do is set max walk speed. So when we press this button, when we press it, we're going to set our max walk speed. Now currently we've got that set to 0. Now what I like to do is I like to get the max walk speed too. So just come off your character movement component and get your max walk speed. And then if we take this max walk speed and we do a times, so if we get float times float, and let's times this by 1.8 for example. So we get the max walk speed, we times it by 1.8, and then we're going to set it as our max walk speed. Now we've done all that when we press. So if we do the opposite, so I've just duplicated everything there by using Control and W. I'm just going to make it look a little better. When we release it, we want to, instead of times, now we want to undo that and divide it. So if we press divide and get float divided by float, and we do the same 1.8, and then we pin that in there. So a little bit messy, but we get a character movement component. We find the max walk speed, we times that by 1.8 and then set that as our new walk speed. And then when we release sprint, we're getting our character movement component speed again, but then this time we're going to divide it by 1.8 and set it back to hopefully what it originally was. Hit compile, hit play, and now when you hit shift, you'll notice you've got a very basic sprint, which is probably good enough for most situations to start with. But that doesn't affect our energy just yet. So let's start depleting some energy. So in the previous video we actually made a function called Deplete Energy. Now what that did is every time we press spacebar to do a jump, it took an amount of our energy from our energy value, which is, this is the function. So how much energy do you want to remove, minus that from your energy, and then reset your energy to the new deducted value. Now unfortunately that doesn't work well with sprint, because essentially your sprint is activated by a single press, but then you are constantly sprinting until it's released. So your energy is only going to go down a single time on the first press. So we need a way of looping an energy deduction as we are continuing to sprint. So what we're going to do, or what I find the best way to do it is, similarly to how we set up the regeneration, we're going to start a regeneration loop, but instead we're going to be setting up a depletion loop. So whenever we start to sprint, let's put that back, we're going to set a timer by event. So this timer is going to loop through and deduct or deplete our energy every time. So we need something to start depleting our sprint energy. So let's make a custom event. I keep putting customer. Custom event and deplete or sprint energy. Deplete. I don't know, something somewhat descriptive. And essentially what we're going to do is we're going to deplete that energy. Now if we link this up to this event, essentially what we've got here is we're going to start sprinting, and then a timer is going to loop, and it's going to delete energy, deplete our energy as we are sprinting, and then we're going to want to stop that afterwards. So let's just finish off this timer. So we want it to loop. The time, how quick do we want it to do this? Now this depends on what type of game that you're doing, or how fast your character can run, and all that sort of stuff. So you can play with this value, but I'll just put 0.1 for now. So for every 0.1 second I want it to deplete some energy, and the amount of energy I'm going to say it's going to cost to sprint is going to be 0.2. No, 0.02, sorry, because my energy is actually 1, so 0.2 would actually deplete my sprint very quickly. So quickly I'm just going to press compile, and I'm just going to check to see if this is working. So if I sprint, you can see my energy is flying down now, but when I stop sprinting it still continues to go down, because we've not told this timer to stop. We've not said, well hang on, we've stopped sprinting now, let's you don't need to take any more energy. So for us to do that, we actually need to clear and invalidate this timer and just say, right, stop being a timer anymore now. So to do that, we need to use this return value. If you remember from the last video, we did this also. So off this return value, you want to promote to a variable, and then when you've got that variable, you just want to give it a name. We're going to call it sprint energy timer. And then what we want to do is, so when we release our our sprint key, this is when we want to stop the energy from being depleted. So we're going to grab this sprint energy timer and we're going to get it, and then from the get we're going to do a clear and invalidate. Now clear and invalidate, what this does is, and as the name suggests, it clears this a looping event and invalidates the timer and says, right, stop, you're done, that's it. So let's drag this back over here. Let's just put that there just for the time being. Let's put that there and put that there. So now what's happening is we press our key. We're then going to increase our walk speed. We're then going to set the timer to get going. So every 0.1 second it's going to loop through this, and in that loop it's going to deplete our energy until we release the key, and then we're going to put our speed back to normal, and we're going to stop our energy from being depleted. Hit compile, hit play, and then as you sprint, your energy now starts to deplete. You stop sprinting, your energy stops being used. However, there is now no regeneration. So now we've stopped sprinting, we want to say, right, great, now you've stopped using energy, you need to start regaining it, because we're not sprinting anymore. So let's do that next. Okay, so for the regeneration, before we actually want to start regenerating health, just in case anything goes wrong, we want to, or if we've jumped and we're already regenerating energy, we probably just want to make a check to say, like, are we already regenerating energy? And if so, then let's not do anything. So the regeneration comes from the previous video which we've built. So there's already a regeneration timer set here, and we've already created a handler here similar for the sprint energy timer here. So what we can actually do is so basically on the release of the key, after we've cleared the sprint energy timer, we can drag in the regen timer, get that, and we can ask it, are you active, essentially. So if you type in is act, you'll get this, is timer active, and essentially that'll give you a yes, it's already running, or no, it's not. If we drag off here and type in branch, we can get, well, If this is false, then let's regen. If it's true, don't do anything. So we'll drag this into the branch, and we've essentially got a yes or a no. So, are you already regenerating? If you are true, don't do anything. If you're not regenerating, start regenerating energy. So now, if we compile and we hit play, and we load in and we sprint and use some energy, once we stop, we're now starting to regenerate energy again. Brilliant. Okay, so now what we need to consider is, what if we don't have enough energy to actually start the run altogether? So what we've essentially got here at the beginning is once the key's pressed, we're just immediately without checking if we've got enough energy to do so. We're just changing the speed that we move at, and then we're going to start removing energy. But if we don't have any energy to remove, then we shouldn't do any of this. Now we need to put a check in here, but as you can see with all this stuff, we're gonna quickly get very busy around here with all these nodes everywhere. Now, one of the things that we can do just before we do create the check is we can tidy this up a little bit. Now, one thing that I find the best way to do is these sort of like noticeably messy functions or macros that we've made here. It's like a little set procedure. We can highlight all of these and we can actually collapse it down to a macro, which is basically just a collection of things. So to do that, what you want to do is you want to highlight all 4 of these nodes. If you right click and select collapse to macro, now what that does is it neatly packs all of that into one little node instead of the 4 different things. Now over on the left it's asking me for a name. Now I've already created this, but I would be calling this start sprint. Because I've already got one that is called start sprint, I'm just going to put start sprint 1 in this instance. And there you go. Everything that was happening a minute ago with the get character movement, get the max walk speed, times that by 1.8 and then set that as the walk speed, that's now all inside this macro. So if you select it and double click it, it'll actually take you to what this macro is doing. So as you can see, it's receiving an execute input, it's getting the character movement, it's getting the max walk speed from the character movement, timing it by 1.8, setting the walk speed, and then continuing on its way. And so it's doing exactly the same as it was before, but instead of having all of this mess here, we've now just got this one node. However, as you can see, it's just execute in and execute out. It'd be really neat if there was a way that we could sort of feed in a speed or a multiplier, so that we don't have to go in there every time and say, actually I want it to be 1.6, I want it to be 1.7. We can feed that in from the outside. So it'd be great if we could just link this up to the input and and feed in some information. Now luckily we can. So by selecting the input, over on the right hand side you can see inputs and outputs. There's also a little plus side, new parameter. So if you give this a click, you might need to change the value. So you just want to select where mine says float, you might say boolean or execute, whatever. You want to change that to float, and then we're going to give this parameter name something like speed multiplier. Speed multiplier. Now, as you can see, it's a float node, so we can drag that now and plug that straight into this multiplication. So now if we hit compile and go back to our event graph, you can see that our start sprint is saying, okay, start sprint, and what multiplier do you want to use? So now we can use 1.8. We can type in 1.8. And now essentially nothing's changed, except we've got the ability to punch in this number on the event graph rather than going into the macro. So what we can do is we can select all of these 4, and we can do the same for the release key, collapse to macro, and over on the left it's asking for a name, so stop, sprinting. I'm just going to put 1 again. Tell you what, I'm just going to put sprint. Stop sprint. Yep, drag that over. And I'm going to do exactly the same again. I'm just going to go inside. I'm going to click on the input. I'm going to click plus on new parameter. Mine's already set to flow. Again, you might need to change yours. And I'm just going to put speed multiplier. Hit compile. I'm now going to go back to my event graph, and you can see they're both the same. So I can type in 1.8 here again. But what would be neat is if we've got a variable which determines that, because then we could maybe later on in your game you've got pickups which can adjust it, and you can sort of add to that multiplier and take it away. So what I've already done is I've created a float here, but I will create a new one. So under your variables, you want to press plus, and you want to call it sprint multi. Hit enter, and then with that you want to give it a default value. Now you have to compile before you can do that, so hit compile. Now sprint multi, I'm going to set that now to 1.8. Hit compile again. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag this out like to here, press get, and then I can now connect both of these up. So now what I've got is all this mess that was here before is now all nicely condensed into these two macros, which are stop and starting my sprint. So now we've got a nice bit of room to do our check. So for the check, all we need to do really is from your variables, from your character stats, is you want to drag some of your energy. You want to grab your energy variable, and we're going to get that. And essentially we just want to check, is this greater than or maybe equal to? I'm going to go for greater than and equal. We're then going to check, is it greater than or equal to, I'm going to put 0.02, and this returns a true or false. So from that we need a branch, which is basically just an if. So if my energy is greater than or equal to 0.2 is true, then we're allowed to start the sprint. Pop that into there like that. So here we've got the check. Get my energy, find out if it's greater than or equal to 0.2. If it is, then we can start the sprint. If it's false, I don't want to do anything because I can't sprint. You could then later set this to, like, I don't know, flash your energy bar, make the energy bar change colour or something to suggest that you don't have enough energy. Yeah, I'll leave that one with you. Now for the release, you might think, well, why do we need to do that? Now the reason is because when we press the button, we're checking to see if we've got enough energy. If we do, we're timesing our walk speed by a multiplier, which then increases our speed, and then the timer starts and so on and so forth. However, when we then release the key to reverse this, we're actually dividing the walk speed by the multiplier. So by only doing the check here, if this was then to be false, have we got enough energy? No. Then the release is still going to trigger anywhere, and we're going to divide our walk speed even lower by 1.8. And then essentially every time we press the key, we're going to be slower and slower. So now we can run, so the script is working fine. But then when we get down to that low value, if I press it now and keep pressing it, my walk speed has now just been zapped all the way down to 0. Now that's not a bug, that's because it's not checking and it's just doing exactly what it thinks so. So now I'm doing both of them, but because it's timesing it by 1.8, but then when I release it, dividing it, now I'm stuck. So that's a bug. So you'd think that I just check the energy again, but that won't work, because if we run all the way to 0, when we go to do the check, it's not going to be greater than. And if we do less than, when it is greater than, this won't work either. So one thing that we can do further down is, when we press the button and we have got enough energy and we start the sprint, we should create a little yes or no for saying we are now sprinting. Yes. or if false, we're not sprinting. So, very simply, under your variables, you want to create a new variable, and you can call it is sprinting. Ooh. Is sprinting. And I always put a question mark on booleans. So again, we want to change the type. So where your little green bean is here for me, I'm just going to click on that and I'm going to make sure that this is set to boolean, and this is going to be a yes or a no. Now I want to set this, so I'm going to drag this over here and I'm going to put this to set. So when I start my sprint, I then want to set my boolean to tick. Have I got enough energy? Yes I do. Start the sprint. Set my boolean to I am sprinting. Yes. Great. Now what you can also do is be a bit proactive and set this to unticked if it's false. So it's do you have enough energy? Yes. Great, we're sprinting. Do you have enough energy? No. Let's just make sure that we set sprint to false, just to prevent any errors, just in case there's anything else we've not considered. So now what we can do is we can say, if I press this, do this check times my thing. If I release it and I'm sprinting, we can reverse this. If we're not sprinting, we didn't make it through this check, so don't do anything to the multiplier. So essentially here, what we're going to do is we're going to get is sprinting. We're going to drag off that, get another branch, put this into here. Are we sprinting? Yes, we are. Stop your sprint. If when you release the key and you're not sprinting, don't do anything, because otherwise you're going to mess up everything else. So hopefully now, if I've thought of everything, when we press play, what I can do is I can sprint, get my energy to 0, let go. If I tap it a couple of times, now we shouldn't slow down to a slug, because we're doing that check. Was I sprinting before you pressed it? No, I'm not. So keep my speed exactly the way we want it. Great. So now we can move on to the next bit. Okay, so just before we proceed, there's one thing that I didn't think about. When we release the sprint key, and let's say if we were sprinting is true, once we stop the sprint, we also want to tell it to set the sprint to false again. Because when we call the stop sprint, we're doing exactly that. We're stopping the sprint. So we may as well set this boolean to I am no longer sprinting. Great, so now that's out of the way. So we've got another problem here. So as you can see, I'm stationary at the moment. I'm not moving. Now if I press sprint, my energy is going down. I'm not even moving. So even if I'm moving or not, if I hold sprint, my energy goes down. That's a bad idea, because that means if we're jumping and we're in mid-air, you know, then we're gonna mess that up. You know, I can just stand here now and hold sprint, and my energy just disappears. So we need to do a check, another check to say, are we even moving? You know, and I think the best place to put that would be here just before we sprint, like, or maybe before we start removing the energy. Now the good thing is, what we can do, we can create this and we can put it everywhere. You know, let's do a check here, let's do a check here. Are we actually moving before we start sprinting? Are we actually moving before we do this, that, or the other? Now I'm going to pop it here, because ultimately if I'm not moving, I'm not bothered if the speed multiplier is changed or not, because I'm not moving, so it's not going to make a visual difference. However, before I start sprinting, set my sprint to yes, or before I start to reduce my energy, which I think's more reasonable to do it, before I start taking my energy off, let's check if we're moving. Now, one of the ways that I would do this would be to add underneath your character movement component, you're able to check the velocity or the speed that your character is moving at. Now, obviously, if this is 0, we're not moving. If this is greater than 0, we're obviously moving at some point, you know, whether that's we're flying through the air or we're sprinting. So, to check for movement, what I like to do is I grab the character movement component from the left here, and then from this you can type in get velocity. City. And if you scroll down, right here at the bottom, as a vector, we've got velocity. Now, the issue with velocity as a vector is that if I right click here and split the pin, I can show you. A velocity is made up of an X, Y and a Z. Now, I don't care about all of these. I just want to know, am I moving or not, yes or no. I don't care about all the numbers. So the good thing about velocity, the good thing about Unreal is you can actually get the length of a velocity. Now, essentially this is just a combined sum of the velocity, and obviously depending on how fast we move, these numbers might be in the hundreds or thousands depending on the sort of speed base of the game, but I don't want that. I just want a simple 1 or a 0. So another good thing about this is for velocity you can actually what's called normalize. So if we normalize the value of it, and then we can do a vector length. So we're taking the character movement component, we're getting its velocity, we're normalizing it to a 1 or a 0. 1 if we're moving, 0 if we're not. But it's still a vector. So let's get the length, and this just changes it to a float. So this is just going to be a single number that we can now do a check on with, is this greater than or equal to 0.5. So because it's between 1 and 0, this is half, and I think that'd be enough of an indication to say we're moving or not. So with a branch now, we can say, let's drag that down here, put that in there. If our character movement's velocity is greater than 0.5 once normalized is true, I'd say we're moving. We can start to deduct our energy. So again, what we can do now is, because this is quite heavy on the nodes, to condense all this down into something a little bit neater, let's select all of these. By holding control and clicking, you can select the remaining ones because they're all squished together, and then we can right click and we can select collapse to macro, and that can just be placed neatly in there. If you've done what I've just done and clicked off it before changing their name, you can just go over to the right here and right click and rename. So this one is moving check. Moving check. Now, essentially, at the moment, all this has got is true. Yes, all the time. If you want to double click on that, and we go into here, now you can see the input is as normal. Comes in, and we do the check, get the velocity, blah blah blah. Is it this? Yes or no? But you can only see true. So if you select on the output, you can see here on outputs there's 1. You can press new parameter, similar as we did before. Change this from a float or whatever type you've got to an execute. So now you've got 2 executes. So we want to change the first execute to true. We want to change the second execute to false. and then you just want to link both of these up. And essentially this is just saying whatever output you get, spit it out. Hit compile, go back to your event graph, and you can see now your moving check has a true or false. So you've just condensed all of this junk into this, and you condense that into a little mini boolean check there. So start sprint, are we sprinting? Yeah. Are we actually moving? If we are, start deducting some energy. Great. So next up, what we want to do is we want to do this check in a few other places as well. So one's maybe as we are depleting our energy, every time we remove a bit of energy, we should check, are we still moving? Because if we're not, well, we need to stop using this. Because what if the character starts to run, this becomes true, we start deducting the energy, but as we are deducting the energy, as we're going through this loop, we then come to a stop. Because at the moment, if I sprint, my energy goes down. If I stop sprinting, see, I'm holding sprint, but I'm not moving, but my sprint energy still continues to go down. So you can see there, as my energy starts to regenerate, I'll hold sprint, but I'll stop moving. My sprint's still going down. So we need to fix that. So essentially what's happening is, we're pressing the button, we have enough energy, we're starting the sprint, we're checking this boolean to say yes, we're sprinting. We're checking to see if we have actually got some momentum, we're actually moving, and the character's not just stood still pressing the button. When we know that, we're then going to start deducting energy because we know we're moving at that point. But once we've started this depletion of energy, nothing's checking if we are still moving whilst we're depleting energy. So essentially, from the moving check over on the left on the macros, you drag one of those over here and pop that into there. We're now saying every time you deplete energy, check to see if you're actually still moving. And if you are, we need to do something. Now, the thing that we need to do is essentially we need to stop this sprint timer from taking our energy, because there's no point in taking more energy if we're not moving anymore. So to do that, what we could actually do is, imagine if we was to like, are you still moving? No. Okay, great. Well, in that case, it's kind of like we've released the key. So you want to do this procedure again. Are we sprinting? Stop sprint, and we should just plug straight into here. Like, are we moving anymore? No. Right, well, stop sprinting. Untick that, do this, do that, and we should go down that route. So one simple thing that we can do is we could actually create a custom event that is essentially the stop sprint, and it takes us back to here. So we're depleting energy, our moving check says, whoa, false, I'm not moving anymore. Damn. Well, I need a custom event, which actually we need to create that before we come off here. So before you pull off the false, just right click in this empty space and type in custom. You should get custom event, and it'll look like this. Whoa, it'll look like this. And what we can do, we can change that to stop sprinting. Stop sprinting. And we've got this custom event. Now, you can see here that the arrow actually points out. This is the bit that we need at the other end. So what you can do is just drag this, click and drag, and we're going to drag that over. And we're gonna need that somewhere near the beginning. So let's just dump that there and just move that there like that. So at some point we're going to need to plug in here, but we'll figure that out in just a minute. So now we've got that stop sprinting custom event. Now when we are false, we can call it. So stop, and then if you can spell sprinting. So now you can see we've got a stop sprinting function. So we're moving, we're taking energy, we're checking if we are still the character's actually moving across the world. If that then becomes false, we need to stop sprinting. So really what we want to do is we want to plug this into here. So we want to say if we release the key, check if we're sprinting. If we call this stop sprinting function, you know, let's do this. Let's do this check to see if we're sprinting. If we are sprinting and it's true, stop the sprint, untick this, blah blah blah. But if we wasn't sprinting, we no longer need to stop sprinting. We don't need to set this to not sprinting. But we do want to clear the sprint timer, and we do want to check to see if there's a regen timer, and then we do want to start regenning. So what we could do with this false is we could bypass all of this and plug it straight into the clear. So if we move that down a little bit now, and that down a little bit, we're saying, right, as our depletion of energy is happening, check if we're moving still. If we're not moving, stop. Just do an arbitrary check to see if this sprinting flag is still true or false. If it's true, actually stop the sprint with the by reducing your speed. Set that to false and then carry on as normal. If this is false, which is, you know, possible, just go straight to clearing the energy timer, which is going to stop us from depleting energy. But then we're going to check to see if we've got a regeneration, and if not, we're going to start to regenerate. So now, if we hit player, and we sprint, and if I just let go of the forward key, you can see that now my energy has stopped, and I start to regenerate health, although I am still holding the sprint key. And then if I start sprinting again, we've got a bug. So now we need to figure that bit out. Okay, so one of the things that we have actually moved out is when we actually press the sprint key and we start the sprint, we previously may have been regenerating our energy. So we've actually no way of saying stop regenerating energy because we're now sprinting and we're going to start using energy. So once we've pressed the key and we've checked to see if we've got enough energy to actually run, and then we start this sprint, we should actually, before we start the sprint, we should say stop regenerating energy now because you don't have any. Sorry, not that you don't have any. We're about to start using some. So essentially what we need to do is we need to grab our regen energy timer from the first video, or you know, if you're following along, you want a regen energy timer, grab that, which is essentially the time handler. Where are we? Is the time handler in our regeneration loop. So I'll zoom back out, back in. We want to say clear and invalidate. So that's basically just saying cancel off the timer which is causing us to regenerate energy, and if we have enough energy and we're ready to sprint is true, clear the regen timer and then do our sprint. So now again we're getting busy here, so I'm just gonna have to drag all out, stretch it out, grab these two and just poke that in there. I'm gonna drag this down here, so that's there. Keep this all nice and neat, or as best as we can. I like to pop these on top of the ear like that. Yep. So there's our check, stop sprinting. If not, let's cancel the energy. Start a sprint based on our multiplier. We are now considered sprinting. However, if we are moving in the world, we only regenerate sprint then. However, the sprint key is still pressed, so we leave that checked. If we are moving, we start the timer, we start depleting our energy, and at the point in this loop that we stop moving, we stop sprinting, which either releasing the key or running out of energy stops us from sprinting. We then just do an arbitrary check to see if we were sprinting. If we was, reduce the multiplier, sets us to false for sprinting, clear the energy depletion timer, check to see if there's a regeneration energy timer before we start another one, and then regenerate energy. Okay, great. So, for now, that's looking pretty good. So, with just a quick recap and looking through that, I think there's just one thing that we've missed at the moment, and essentially it's around here. Now, every time we deplete the energy, we're checking to see if we're still moving, but we don't check to see if we've got enough energy to continue to deplete it. So that's another reason we should stop sprinting, is I'm running, removing my energy as we're running, so we're using energy, but there isn't enough energy to use. But in this loop, we never actually check. So essentially, you could hold the key and sprint forever. Our energy would actually get to 0, but there's no function to say, well, stop sprinting. You're still moving, but you don't have enough energy to keep moving, so you should stop. Now, we need to do 2 checks at the same time here, really. So, what we could do here is we could use what's called a sequence node, and we can sort of do 2 things at once. We can say, right, check if we're moving, stop sprinting. Then, is my energy high enough for it? So what we can do is we could go back over to the beginning. We could highlight this check, because essentially this is what we're doing. We're just checking have we got enough energy to continue doing it. Hit Control and C, and we've copied those now. Head over to this end and press Control and V, and this should paste around where your mouse pointer is. So let's see if we've just got enough space here. Let's just move these down a little bit so we're not too cramped. And essentially then we want to deplete energy, check if we're moving. If we're false, stop sprinting. But if this comes back true, then it just keeps looping and looping and looping. But then, if our energy becomes less than, or if the greater than is false, we also want to stop sprinting. So, is my energy greater than or equal to 0.02? No. We don't have enough energy to continue. Stop sprinting. And then we're going to do this loop again. So now, if we hold sprint, run around the map, let's just do a quick U-turn here, and then boom. Now our energy's run out. We're regenerating energy again, but it stopped me from sprinting. Sprint, stop. I'm still holding sprint, but because I don't have enough energy to do that, it's cancelled it out. So now I need to activate sprint again. So inherently we've done a cancel as well, and this should now work as you'd expect it to. This might have been a bit of a long one because I haven't felt great. I have cut this up into little pieces, so hopefully the editing has worked out well. Apologies that the video has taken a lot longer to come out. I will try to get back onto every Sunday. Apart from that, if this video did help you out, or if after the fact it comes to it that I have missed something out and something doesn't work quite as expected, if I've not already addressed it with another video, please leave a comment down below and I'll look into it. No doubt there'll be something I've missed with me not feeling too great. But nonetheless, if it helped, please consider giving me a like. Leave comments and feedback down below. I really appreciate that. And if you want to continue watching videos like this, consider subscribing, because like I said, I'm gonna just due to illness, I haven't posted frequently in the last 2 weeks, but I'm hoping to get back on track to every Sunday. So with all that being said, thank you for watching, and see you in the next video. Thank you.